Every June, Royal Ascot transforms into more than just a horse race. It becomes the grand theatre of the monarchy. For centuries, this elegant week in Berkshire has served as more than a sporting event. It's a ritual of British tradition, a ceremonial stage where royalty and nobility descend in splendor, surrounded by fanfare, pageantry, and anticipation. But amid the thunder of hooves and flashes of polished cameras, there lies a quiet truth. The event is not about the horses. It's about who shows up to watch them. This year was no different. Whispers began weeks in advance. Would Princess Catherine appear? Would she bring her signature grace and unwavering composure to the royal procession? Would she and William once again enchant the crowd with their effortless unity? The buzz was unmistakable, electric. Every paper speculated, every fan clung to hope. After all, Catherine's previous appearances at Royal Ascot had not just been about fashion or formality. They had symbolized strength, continuity, and a rare sense of relatability within the monarchy. To the public, her presence isn't just decorative. It's meaningful. In a royal family often criticized for distance and coldness, Catherine has long stood apart as the warm, grounded figure they could believe in. Her smile, her manner, her restraint, it all reads like reassurance to a nation navigating uncertain times. So when her name appeared on the official carriage list, the crowd exhaled with joy. She was coming. The Princess of Wales would once again take her rightful place in this theatre of legacy. And not just anywhere. She would ride in the carriage beside Prince William, who himself was slated to present one of the most prestigious trophies of the day, the Prince of Wales's Stakes. It was shaping up to be a historic sight, a beautiful continuation of royal duty under King Charles's reign, with the next generation subtly assuming their place in the foreground. For a monarchy that has endured transition, scandal, and mounting pressure to modernize, this was a chance to showcase stability, to say, we are still here. But beneath the anticipation, a subtle current of worry persisted. The princess had, after all, made only a few recent public appearances since her shocking cancer announcement earlier in the year. Though her return at Trooping the Color had given the public a glimmer of hope, it wasn't lost on anyone how thin she looked. How carefully choreographed every moment seemed. How silent she remained about her true condition. Still, her presence at Royal Ascot felt like a confirmation she was recovering, she was regaining strength, and most importantly, she was resuming the role the nation hoped she'd never have to abandon. But just as the nation eagerly awaited Catherine's radiant arrival, the unimaginable happened. She was listed on the official program. The carriages were ready. Then silence. The world expected her. The press confirmed her. Royal watchers circled the date, and socialites prepared their cameras. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was officially announced to appear in the Wednesday carriage procession alongside Prince William. It wasn't just any placement. It was a ceremonial highlight, front-facing, public, and prestigious. All signs pointed to her long-awaited return to form. But within minutes, the calm turned to chaos. Her name is gone. Quietly, suddenly, and without explanation. It wasn't an error. It wasn't a reshuffle. Kensington Palace intervened swiftly, confirming that Catherine would no longer be attending. That was all they said. No details. No substitute. Just absence. The news spread through the crowd like wildfire. The moment felt suspended, unnatural. Crowds who had braved the sweltering heat, some standing for hours just for a fleeting glimpse, now stared at empty space, unsure what to make of it. Photographers adjusted their lenses. Royal correspondents whispered into their microphones, scrambling for updates. It wasn't just disappointment. It was something deeper. A wave of concern rolled through the racetrack grounds like a shadow. Why would the palace pull her name just after confirming it? Why wait until the 11th hour? Why the silence? The questions came faster than answers ever could, and the public, already emotionally invested in her recovery, felt a collective anxiety stir. For many, Catherine's attendance wasn't just symbolic, it was essential. It was hope. After months of limited appearances and guarded statements, her scheduled participation in Royal Ascot had felt like a turning point. A new chapter. But now, that chapter had vanished before the ink could dry. Royal insiders stayed tight-lipped. Even seasoned commentators, usually equipped with insider gossip or speculative spin, offered little more than a shrug cloaked in formality. Scheduling changes, some guessed. Health management, others cautiously whispered. But no one knew for sure. Not even the most seasoned royal watchers could crack the sudden silence. Behind the charm of tradition, this moment marked something far more serious. The princess's name had never been dropped so last minute. This wasn't a weather delay or wardrobe mishap. It was strategic, deliberate, and executed with chilling precision. And that made it all the more alarming. Has her condition worsened? Was there a new health development being withheld? Or was the pressure simply too great too soon? This wasn't just a missing royal. It was a missing heartbeat of the event. And the public felt it. In their words. In their expressions. In the uneasy tension that hung over the royal enclosures like a curtain refusing to rise. And while her absence stirred the public, behind palace doors, a more somber reality unfolded. This wasn't just about an event. This was about healing, survival, and balance. For months, the world had waited for signs, any signs, that Catherine was coming back. Back to duty. Back to strength. Back to the public stage where she had long stood with grace, elegance, and resilience. But what most people forget is this. Cancer doesn't care about titles. It doesn't pause for tradition. It doesn't wait for royal Ascot. Behind the polished palace walls and carefully crafted statements, Catherine was facing the most personal and private battle of her life. Her diagnosis had shaken the nation, yes, but it shattered her own world in a way that very few could ever understand. As a mother of 3, a wife to the future king, and the most scrutinized woman in Britain, she was expected to carry herself like a queen in waiting, even while her body was breaking beneath the surface. Her recent return to public life, trooping the color, the Order of the Garter, and a visit to the V&A East had been cautiously celebrated as signs of recovery. But behind the smiles and camera flashes was a woman pushing herself to be present, to be seen, to prove that she was still standing. Those moments were victories, no doubt. But they came at a cost. Each appearance required hours of preparation, both physical and emotional. And the aftermath? Often days of exhaustion, of silence, of resetting a body still learning how to heal. The decision to step back from royal Ascot wasn't made lightly. It wasn't a simple change in plans. It was a reminder that beneath the royal regalia is a human being trying to survive something terrifying. Kensington Palace, in a rare show of transparency, insisted that flexibility would define Catherine's schedule moving forward. There would be no expectations, no pressure, only compassion. And that, in itself, was a radical move for an institution built on duty and consistency. What the public saw as absence was, in reality, an act of unimaginable strength. It takes courage to step into the spotlight while you're still healing. But it takes even more courage to step away from it. Catherine did not choose absence. She chose protection. She chose her children. She chose not to sacrifice her recovery for a photo opportunity, no matter how iconic. In an era where public figures are expected to be ever-present, Catherine's silence spoke louder than any appearance could. It told the world that her life and her health were worth prioritizing. That even princesses are allowed to pause. Even future queens need to catch their breath. Yet even in her absence, the princess's spirit seemed to walk beside those who took her place. If Catherine couldn't be there in person, her mother would bring the royal charm instead. As the royal carriages rolled through Ascot without the Princess of Wales, all eyes searched for a familiar presence, someone who could remind the crowd of Catherine's spirit, her grace, her unshakable poise. And there she was. Carole Middleton. The woman who raised the future queen. The woman who, without saying a word, stepped forward to represent her daughter in the most elegant way imaginable. Dressed in a delicate butter-colored lace dress by a royal favorite designer and crowned with a blush-toned wide-brimmed hat that turned heads, Carole did more than just attend, she commanded presence. Her look was regal without being forced, modern yet timeless. But more than the fashion, it was her demeanor that stunned the public. Poised, warm, confident. It was Catherine without Catherine, and the symbolism was impossible to ignore. This wasn't Carole's first royal Ascot appearance, but this one carried weight. This time, she wasn't simply there as a guest. She was there as a stand-in. A silent statement. That the Middleton women remain united, that Catherine is supported, and that even in her most vulnerable hour, her legacy walks beside her. For royal watchers and supporters, the message was powerful. If Catherine couldn't be seen, then her mother, her mirror in spirit and strength, would show the world that the family remained strong, present, and full of grace. The crowd noticed. The media took note. And what might have been a quiet, overlooked appearance suddenly became the most talked about fashion moment of the day. There was something deeply emotional about Carole's calmness amid the whirlwind of speculation. She smiled gently. She waved politely. And she carried the weight of her daughter's absence not with sorrow, but with pride. It was as if she understood her role both as mother and quiet representative of a woman the world was aching to see. The elegance wasn't just in the dress. It was in the gesture. The silent solidarity. And slowly, the media lens adjusted. The conversation shifted. The attention that had once fixated on Catherine's health moved, for a moment, to her roots, to the woman who raised her, shaped her, and now stood in her place. There was no official statement, no grand announcement. There didn't need to be. Carole Middleton's appearance was the message. Catherine is loved. Catherine is protected. Catherine is not alone. But Catherine wasn't the only one missed that day. Her absence echoed most in the man walking alone. Without his partner beside him, William carried both their responsibilities on and off the field. There was no announcement. No change in protocol. Just one less figure in the carriage and one more weight on his shoulders. Prince William, polished as ever, stepped into the first royal carriage beside King Charles and Queen Camilla, accompanied by Saudi royalty, Prince Saud bin Khalid Al Saud. But no matter how full the coach seemed, a space remained visibly empty to those who knew. That space belonged to Catherine. And her absence wasn't just noticed, it was felt. William, stoic as always, wore his duty like armor. But even armor has its cracks. And for those watching closely, the strain was hard to ignore. This wasn't just another appearance for the Prince of Wales. It was a public performance without his most trusted co-star. Every royal engagement carries pressure, but Royal Ascot is different. It's intimate, it's ceremonial, and it thrives on partnership. In previous years, Catherine's smile had softened William's seriousness. Her presence added balance, grace, and warmth. But this time, he stood alone. And with every wave, every handshake, every moment under the watchful eyes of thousands, William bore the weight of being both a leader and a husband navigating uncertainty. Even his interactions with foreign dignitaries held a different kind of gravity. When he greeted Prince Saud and engaged in polite conversation, the ease was there but the sparkle was missing. William wasn't just representing the crown. He was filling in for someone whose absence was loud in its silence. Later that afternoon, he stepped forward to present the Prince of Wales's Stakes trophy, a gesture that was once purely ceremonial but now held emotional weight. The irony was impossible to ignore. The race named for him was being awarded by a man quietly racing against the tides of personal strain and public expectation. In the crowd, there were no boos. No criticism. Just empathy. People could see the effort. The grace under pressure. The prince doing what he was raised to do, carry on. But underneath the polished exterior, there was a flicker of solitude. The kind that comes from knowing that even in a sea of supporters, the one person who truly steadies you is somewhere else fighting her own battle. And yet, he stood tall. Because that's what duty demands. Because that's what love requires. In many ways, William's appearance wasn't about continuity, it was about resilience. It was about showing the nation that even when one pillar trembles, the structure holds. That the monarchy, though deeply personal behind the scenes, must still present strength on the surface. And he did just that. Quietly. Honorably. But it wasn't just about who came, it was about how the people responded. They came for Catherine but stayed for compassion. The crowd that gathered at Royal Ascot had anticipated the glamour, the tradition, the royal parade. But what they weren't expecting was the wave of emotion that would ripple through the racecourse when news of Catherine's absence finally settled into the air like a lingering shadow. People didn't murmur with frustration. They didn't grumble with entitlement. Instead, they exhaled a collective sigh of understanding. And in that moment, the event shifted from spectacle to solidarity. One by one, voices began to rise not in protest, but in empathy. A woman named Jane Price, her hat tilted delicately in the sun, spoke with quiet reverence. "I had cancer at 31, she told a nearby reporter. How she's managed at 43 with 3 young children and the pressure of a nation on her shoulders. It's remarkable." Another guest, a man named Ian, nodded solemnly beside her. "Our daughter was very ill once. We get it. This heat alone is brutal. If she needs to rest, she should rest. She doesn't owe us anything." It wasn't a pity. It was recognition. Catherine, often seen as a serene figure far removed from the struggles of ordinary life, suddenly felt close. Humans. Real. And in her absence, the public saw her not as a duchess or a future queen but as a woman, a mother, a fighter. The kind of strength she was displaying was not from showing up, but from knowing when not to resonate in ways no crown ever could. The conversation turned. Not just toward her illness, but toward the relentless expectations placed on royal women. Always present. Always perfect. Always smiling, even when their world crumbles behind palace walls. Catherine's choice to step back became, in the eyes of many, an act of rebellion against that impossible standard. A quiet, powerful declaration that even royalty has limits. Support flowed in from all corners. Social media lit up not with disappointment, but with warmth. Messages flooded timelines praising her bravery, her grace, her decision to put health before headlines. And in a country that has long been skeptical of the monarchy's relevance, this moment did something extraordinary. It reminded the people why they still care. Why Catherine still matters. Not because of her title, but because of her truth. She didn't need to walk through the gates of Ascot to make an impact. Her absence spoke louder than any appearance could. And in doing so, she won something far greater than applause. She won unwavering loyalty. The kind that isn't demanded by tradition, but earned through authenticity. And in the face of absence, others stepped forward not to replace her, but to remind the world that the show must go on. The royal family is not a solo act, it's an ensemble that rises when one falls. With Catherine's absence casting a long and quiet shadow over royal Ascot, a different kind of strength emerged not through a single figure, but through the collective presence of the extended royal circle. They came not with fanfare, but with purpose. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester arrived in their familiar dignified fashion, anchoring the older generation's steadfast commitment to duty. Lady Sarah Chatto, Princess Margaret's reserved yet deeply respected daughter, also made an appearance, her quiet elegance often missed by headlines, but never by those who understand the unspoken codes of royal solidarity. Each presence was more than ceremonial, it was deliberate, almost strategic. In times of personal difficulty, the crown does not retract. It reorganizes. Friends of the Waleses were scattered among the crowds. James Mead and Thomas van Strabenzee, both longtime confidants of Prince William, whose loyalty extends far beyond social formality. Their attendance didn't just fill empty seats. It filled emotional gaps. The same circle that stood beside William and Catherine at their wedding now stood again, this time not in celebration, but in silent support. And for those watching closely, it was clear, these weren't just friends. They were pillars. Trusted, constant, and essential. The media took notice. Not just of who was there, but why they were there. In the absence of Catherine, the ecosystem of the royal institution quietly recalibrated. The carriage processions were still elegant. The conversations are still formal. But the energy had shifted. What had once been about grandeur was now about unity. There was no flurry of replacements, no desperate scramble for headlines. Instead, there was a calm assertion: the monarchy doesn't stumble when one member steps back. It leans in. It surrounds me. It protects. Fashion, too, spoke volumes. Every hat, every color, every pairing told a story. Pastel hues symbolizing solidarity. Familiar designers with nods to previous appearances by Catherine herself. These weren't just outfits. They were signals. Carefully chosen reminders that while one member of the firm might be healing in private, her influence remained in full view. She hadn't vanished. She'd been absorbed into the fabric of those who showed up in her stead. What emerged was something unexpected. Not a void, but a chorus. A subtle symphony of duty, grace, and resilience echoing through every handshake, every smile, every shared glance among royals and friends. It reminded the world that while the monarchy may be centered around individuals, it is upheld by the community. And at Royal Ascot, that community stood tall not to overshadow Catherine's absence, but to honor it. But while the royal family celebrated tradition, the shadow of one absent figure loomed over the festivities. Every tiara comes with weight. Catherine's is no different. For years, she carried it effortlessly, or so it seemed. A smile that softened the harshest glare, a wave that calmed the most frenzied crowd, a composure that never cracked, not even under the spotlight of 1,000 headlines. But beneath that polished exterior lies a truth far heavier than diamonds or protocol. Because while the world sees a princess, What it rarely sees is the price of being one. The media's obsession with Catherine has never been subtle. From the moment she entered the royal fold, cameras never stopped tracking her every move, every outfit, every expression. And since her diagnosis, that lens has only grown sharper, piercing, impatient, and at times cruel in its demands for updates, appearances, and proof of recovery. Each outing becomes a spectacle. Each silence, a scandal. But no one asks how it feels to be watched not for who you are, but for how well you can pretend everything is fine. Behind the palace gates, the balancing act is relentless. Catherine is a mother, tending to 3 young lives that demand her love and presence. She is a wife, standing beside a man who's not just a husband, but the future king. And now, she is a patient battling something that doesn't care about titles or tradition. The clash between public duty and private survival is brutal. And unlike most, she doesn't have the luxury of fading into the background. Not without consequence. Not without the world asking, where is she? The pressure is not new. History has shown what this system does to women who try to live within it. Diana bore it with anguish. Meghan walked away from it altogether. But Catherine has endured it in silence, shouldering the expectations of monarchy, motherhood, and media with a grace that, in truth, was never owed to anyone. And yet, she gave it freely. Until now. Her absence from Royal Ascot was more than a missed engagement. It was a message. A subtle rebellion against the idea that visibility equals value. That perfection must be perpetual. That royal women must always perform. In stepping back, Catherine reminded the world that she is not a symbol. She is not a headline. She is a human being fighting a battle behind closed doors, choosing her health over hollow appearances. And for that, she redefined what strength looks like. In many ways, her decision marked a turning point not just for herself, but for the institution she represents. If a future queen can pause, then maybe the monarchy can learn to breathe too. Maybe the age of silent suffering in satin gowns is coming to an end. Maybe compassion is finally replacing expectation. Yet in her quiet withdrawal, Catherine may have just rewritten what it means to be a modern royal. By choosing rest over routine, Catherine proved strength doesn't always wear a crown. In a world that demands constant visibility, Catherine did something radical. She stepped back. And in doing so, she didn't diminish her influence, she deepened it. For centuries, royalty has been defined by appearances. By processions, balcony waves, and carefully curated smiles. But Catherine broke that mold, not with a speech or a statement, but with absence. It was quiet. It was deliberate. And it was powerful. In that one decision, she reminded the world that the greatest strength sometimes lies in knowing when to stop, when to breathe, when to heal. The press, for once, didn't turn against her. Instead, they softened. Headlines once fixated on speculation began shifting in tone, admiration replacing scrutiny, support replacing suspicion. Even the most cynical commentators began to acknowledge that Catherine's decision reflected something the monarchy has long struggled with: humanity. She wasn't cloaked in duty that day. She was wrapped in the very real fabric of exhaustion, vulnerability, and grace. And it resonated deeply with a public exhausted by their own battles. She wasn't absent from Royal Ascot because she abandoned duty. She was absent because she redefined it. In a system that has historically punished emotional transparency, Catherine showed that grace doesn't mean perfection. It means wisdom. Her choice to recover on her own timeline, not the palace's, not the media's, wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. It said to every person watching, you're allowed to pause. Even when the world keeps spinning. Even when expectations roar like thunder around you. In many ways, her journey has created something entirely new, a monarchy led not by obligation, but by empathy. Not by stoicism, but by sensitivity. And as the nation looked toward Windsor, it wasn't the gowns or the carriages that held their gaze, it was the empty seat. The silhouette that reminded them of a woman facing the unrelenting intersection of public image and private pain, and doing it with unshakable dignity. Respect for Catherine has never been louder. Not because she's worn a crown, but because she's carried a burden. And done so in a way that makes others feel seen, understood, and inspired. Her emotional intelligence is becoming her legacy. And if this is the model for the monarchy's future, it's one the people are ready to embrace. So yes, this year's Royal Ascot had its elegance, its tradition, its legacy. But what it had most of all was a void, a powerful, purposeful void that told a deeper story. One of quiet courage. One of modern royalty. One of a queen in waiting who chooses when to rise, and when to rest. And as the carriages rolled on without her, the message was clear: Catherine may have missed the race, but she's winning the battle that matters most. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.